I pull up after a 12-hour hospital shift. My takeout steaming on the passenger seat, and there dead center in my driveway is a giant white SUV, like a brick wall. No wiggle room. No apology. Just the nerve to leave it there. I take a breath, call a tow truck, and by the time I'm halfway through my fries, the tow truck's hauling their car away. If you've ever been pushed around by someone who thinks kindness equals weakness, hit subscribe. This is one of those quiet, satisfying stories where standing your ground matters. Like, share, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. My name is James Whitmore. I'm 60-something and I've been a nurse for decades, still pulling 12-hour shifts at the hospital. So when I finally pull into my driveway after a long night, I expect two things: my wife's half-cracked smile waiting in the kitchen, and the small ritual of putting my feet up without a hassle. I live on a little cul-de-sac, the kind with kids' bikes out front in summer and lawn chairs that know all the neighborhood gossip. My driveway fits two cars, mine and my wife's. For the most part, folks mind their business. But every neighborhood has one snake in the grass. In our case, his name is Jack. Jack's 30-something, loud when he wants to be, and for reasons I never understood, he decided my driveway was community property. It started small. The first time I noticed one of his cars in my space, I told myself it was an accident. "Oh, sorry, just a sec," he said with that half-smile that's supposed to cover for rudeness. His brother's Subaru took up my side of the concrete for maybe 10 minutes. I shrugged it off. I'm an old man. I've got patience, and I've learned the art of letting small things slide. But then it became a pattern, a deliberate inch-by-inch erosion of the courtesy you expect from neighbors. I'd come home after a night shift and find someone else's truck nose to bumpers in my spot. Once I walked up the driveway balancing 5 grocery bags because some young buck thought my space was extra parking. My back is the kind that remembers every heavy lift. My knees creak like an old screen door. Carrying groceries down the block, thinking about the leftover antibiotics in my own fridge, the sense of being dismissed got under my skin. What bothered me wasn't just the inconvenience, it was the message. When someone continually takes what's yours without a real apology, you feel diminished. I'm not a militant man, but I do know the difference between being reasonable and being walked over. It isn't about the car. It's about being seen as less invisible, overly accommodating, somehow beneath the person doing the taking. I'm old enough to remember when a man's word and a handshake meant something. I'm also old enough to know that being nice doesn't always pay the rent on dignity. You don't get to train me into tolerating your disrespect. Each time I spoke up, Jack would smile that same lazy smile and wave a hand like it was nothing. "They'll be gone soon," he'd say. "Just park on the street," as if I wanted to. As if the street was my first choice instead of a forced concession. I tried to keep my voice steady the first few times. "Hey, that's my spot," I'd say. "Could you move it?" He'd nod. The universe would tilt back in its rightful place, and sometimes the car moved. But sometimes it didn't, and the look on his face, something like amusement at being able to push a 60-year-old around, lodged in me like a splinter. You have to imagine the way anger trickles into older bones. It's not the hot, cartoonish boil that you see in movies. It's colder and more deliberate. It sits behind the sternum, a tightening, and thoughts start cataloging possibilities. Will this be a pattern for the rest of my life? Do I have to rearrange my nights because of someone else's arrogance? I've worked 12-hour shifts where my feet felt like they belonged to someone else. The thought of coming home and being blocked, especially on a night when I'd crawled into bed, exhausted and hungry, it felt like the last straw snapping. The night that ended everything was one of those shifts. The kind where AA comes at you in waves and you breathe in the smell of antiseptic like it's the weather. I finished my rounds, said the goodnights to the techs, and headed home in my scrubs. Dinner was a paper bag of takeout, the kind of meal you treat yourself to after a 12-hour grind. A sandwich wrapped in waxed paper, fries that were already on the edge of cold. The thought of sitting, loosening my shoes, switching on the TV small comforts, was all I had. I pull into the cul-de-sac, and there, right where my car always goes, is that SUV, not nudged to the side, parked like it owned the whole strip of concrete. I remember the way the tail lights glowed in the dark like smug eyes. I got out and knocked. Once, twice, no answer. The house was lit, muffled voices inside, a laugh halfway through a sentence. I called Jack. He picked up on the third ring, mouth full of something completely casual. "Oh, that's my in-laws. They'll only be here a couple hours," he said, as if I should be honored they were dropping by. In that moment, I felt the old baseball player routine of sizing up a pitch. Do you swing? Do you let it go? My hands were still a little shaky from the shift, not with anger so much as fatigue, but the anger was there, a quiet, steady thing that made a decision feel less like revenge and more like setting a boundary. I thought of my wife standing at the sink, the way she smiled when I came home, and how I belonged in my own home without having to park on the other side of town. I did something that surprised even me. I asked Jack a single, calm question. "Did you ask them not to park on my driveway?" He hesitated. "No," he admitted, almost like the truth tasted sour. "They'll be gone soon." He said it like a fact I should accept. That was it. I had to make a choice that would stop the pattern, or it would continue. I went to the car, called the tow company I'd used years back when a relative's van broke down, little loans of inconvenience you make for family. I didn't call screaming or threaten. I simply asked, "Can you come out? Someone's blocking my private driveway." The dispatcher asked if I owned the property. I said yes. I told him I'd checked the ordinance before, and in our town, if your private driveway is blocked, you have the right to have the vehicle removed. I've lived here long enough to know the rules. I also know when to use them. When the tow truck rumbled up, I stood on the sidewalk, hands in the pockets of my scrub jacket, a little hunched from the day, but steady. The driver got out, a guy in his 40s with a weathered face and the kind of efficiency that comes from doing the job 1,000 times. He hit the lock on the SUV. The truck hooked the SUV, checked the tags, and in a matter of minutes it was being lifted like a petulant toy. I'll admit it, there was a satisfaction that warmed me, like chewing hot bread. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't poetic justice on a grand scale. It was proportionate, the natural consequence of having trespassed on someone else's space. There was a moral neatness to it. Jack had been handed back a simple rule of society. You can't keep taking what's not yours. When the in-laws came running out, angry and red-faced, Jack behind them with his voice pitched high, the scene was almost comical. "You didn't have to take it that far," he yelled, as if the world owed him leniency. I stepped onto my porch, palms slightly sweaty, voice steady, and said what I'd planned. You told me they'd only be a couple hours, I said. You told me it wasn't a big deal. I treated it like it wasn't a big deal. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I let the facts sit there like weights. You don't get to decide what's okay on my property, I said. The man who owned the SUV, the driver, had to pay nearly $300 to retrieve it from impound. They left huffing, muttering about old man drama, but there was no smirk on Jack's face anymore. Only sheepishness, the kind that follows a reminder that someone else won't be pushed. Over the next few days, the neighborhood noticed the change. People who had seen our exchange waved a little more courteously. Jack started keeping his cars on his side of the street. My driveway stayed clear, almost painfully pristine, like a little private victory. Not a dramatic unmasking or a viral justice memo, just a line in the sand that I drew and refused to let be crossed again. I want to be clear about what this did to me inside. Vindication tastes different at my age. It's not a boon, it's a gentle settling of shoulders. The lesson for me was less about teaching Jack a lesson and more about reminding myself that boundaries aren't rude. They're necessary. For decades I've been a caretaker at work, an ear for folks who needed it, and a man who prefers peace over conflict. But there's a difference between peace and passivity, between letting things slide and allowing others to take advantage. If there's any regret at all, it's that I didn't do it sooner. I let too many small offenses pile up because I thought being a good neighbor meant not making waves. That's a romantic idea, but not always practical. Sometimes the kind thing to everybody, including yourself, is to draw a clear line and let the natural consequences teach the next person. So that's the story. A white SUV, a tow truck, and a man who decided that his peace of mind was worth standing up for. The revenge wasn't dramatic, didn't humiliate anyone beyond the embarrassment they earned, and it stopped the pattern. In the end, my driveway stayed exactly where it should be. Mine. If this story made you feel that little rush of vindication, like cold coffee finally tasting sweet, hit like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what boundary did you enforce that made everything better? Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the right move is simply to stand your ground.